what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday. Excuse me. Oh, belching. It's Monday, August 14th, 2017, start of a brand new week. All kinds of things going on. Got to cut back on the ginger ale, I think, here. Anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone and put you on the air. Quick little program note, tomorrow in hour number 3, barring the realities of diplomatic life, Leon Siu, the foreign minister for the Kingdom of Hawaii, will be joining us on the air to talk about sovereignty, secession, independence, and, again, the Kingdom of Hawaii. So we'll be looking forward to that as well. Now, interesting stuff over the weekend. Been keeping a close eye on this. As you know, right now, the rioting in Charlottesville and the promise of more to come in Seattle and Boston has dominated the news, almost to the point where you're wondering, is there something we're not supposed to be looking at? And it looks like behind all the noise of Charlottesville, the U.S. is taking a step back from confrontation with North Korea. A lot of back-channel discussion going on. China has stepped on in and said they will intervene with a U.S. first strike against North Korea. Now, no politician likes to lose face. So all of a sudden, oh, look over here, we've got Charlottesville. Now, it's not really clear what's going on with North Korea because there are a lot of mixed signals coming in from different people, again reminding us that our government currently is very badly factionalized. We're going to get into that a little bit here in depth. But as of this morning, here's what's going on. There are no new U.S. forces heading to South Korea. The forces that are already there are not on any kind of special alert. There are no new naval assets sailing toward the peninsula. That's where we are right now. And the director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, is saying that we are not on the cusp of a nuclear war with North Korea. They're pulling on back on this idea that North Korea can nuke Alaska or Hawaii or any place else. They're pulling back from that. And they're out there still talking tough. We're ready to go here, but we're willing to talk. So they're kind of pulling back, and now the CIA is saying there's no indication war is going to break out with North Korea. Oh, hey, look at the rioting over in Charlottesville there. And again, story coming out of Business Insider that there are, in fact, back-channel discussions going on between the government of North Korea and the government of the United States. So they're talking. That's a good thing. They're talking and trying to find an exit strategy where everybody gets to save face when they pull back from that. Now, of course, complicating that are the new sanctions imposed by the United Nations Security Council. And there may be a deal to lift those, and Kim Jong-un would then shut his mouth a little bit and let the situation kind of back on down. Now, here's where it comes on down to. If North Korea is, in fact, close to a nuclear warhead and a missile, then at this point, they're really untouchable. The U.S. isn't going to go in there. The U.S. only whoops on nations that are helpless and disarmed and they don't have weapons of mass destruction. So it may turn out that North Korea really was a lot closer than anybody thought, and the U.S. is saying, okay, it's not worth trying to invade. They can exact a tremendous cost. So how do we get out of this without looking like we've hit the chicken switch? Oh, look, there's a riot over in Charlottesville. Now, China did go ahead and implement the UN sanctions. And that was kind of an iffy thing because Donald Trump is still threatening a trade war, a trade probe, intellectual property. And it's kind of arrogant for the U.S. government to be threatening trade sanctions against China, pushing against China's sovereign territory in the South China Sea, and then turn around and say, you guys have to help us sort out this mess with North Korea. And that may be the reason why China, late last week, did a 180 and came on out and said, if the United States attempted a preemptive attack on North Korea, China would move to intervene. And that may be the real sticking point on which the U.S. decided they really were not prepared to go in there at this point. Plus, let's be honest, despite all the polls on the corporate media saying, oh yes, Americans are ready for another war in North Korea, the reality is, and you can confirm it for yourself talking to everybody that you know, there is no popular support for any more wars in North Korea, Iran, or anywhere else. We're a war-weary people. We've been in these wars against all these other countries longer than we were in Big Mistake number 1 and Big Mistake number 2 put together, and we're broke. We're tired. We don't want to see any more of our kids coming home in wheelchairs or those cheap metal boxes. There is no support for this. Nobody's buying the propaganda that North Korea is a threat. The opinion of the world in general, and Americans in particular, is it is the United States of America that is the threat to global peace. All right, we're going to do a little shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, is starting to basically go back to the points on which he campaigned and saying, we want to avoid a war. We want to pull back from this. And Moon Jae-in is out there saying to the U.S., no, we do not want a war. Let's find a way to pull back from this because any war is going to turn into a nuclear war sooner or later. So people really started waking up and realizing this wasn't a game. This wasn't abstract. We were really flirting with a potential nuclear war with China. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people were saying it was rather surprising how the rapid advance North Korea had been making. I mean, it was only a few years ago where half of every test firing blew up on the launch pad or during staging, and then all of a sudden their rockets are flying and hitting what they're aiming at. And the New York Times has actually come on out with a report that North Korea is buying rocket engines for their missiles from our good friends over in Ukraine. Yes, our good buddy over there, Poroshenko. He's selling the rocket engines to North Korea. And it may seem a little disloyal, but, you know, money's money, and we're here to make business here. All right, let's take a phone call. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I was never a Trump supporter. But I told myself, you know, just give him a chance to see what he does. I was very disappointed about the bombing in Syria.
Yes.
I'm extremely disappointed and angry regarding his attitude toward North Korea,
yes,
and threatened them. And what happened on Saturday, where he basically said nothing and waited until today to call out those groups. And I said to myself, if you can't call them out, either you believe in them or those people are giving you campaign or advising you on the side. Donald Trump is 71 years old. He knows about Nazis. He knows about the KKK. It's not like he's a person who turned 30 or 40, so he should have said something more strong on Saturday and not wait until today. I mean, just by if he would have called the parents of the young lady that was murdered, I would have said, well, he's doing something. But to wait 2 days, what are your feelings about my comments?
Well, first of all, I'm in agreement with you. I was a Trump supporter, and I'm still glad he and not Hillary Clinton is in that White House. But he has been a tremendous disappointment on a lot of issues, and certainly the war agenda is one of them. As far as Charlottesville, we still don't really have a clear, accurate picture of what exactly went wrong there. We cannot get away from the possibility that this was, in fact, deliberately fanned up by paid agent provocateurs. We know that Antifa is funded by George Soros, among others. And like I said earlier in the program, it almost seemed like somebody wanted a media distraction so that they could pull back on North Korea and not have people really notice it.
I would agree with that because I think I heard the mayor. Originally, they wanted the protesters to be not downtown but somewhere else. But this federal judge intervened and said, look, they have to march downtown. That's what they want.
Yes.
So maybe you're right about a false flag. And also, what was David Duke doing there? He just came out of nowhere.
Well, I'm not sure what he was doing there, and to be very honest, I'm like Trump. I'm just catching up on Charlottesville right now because obviously living here in Hawaii, North Korea and the potential for a mushroom cloud out that window have kind of been at the top of my things to worry about list. So I'm getting into Charlottesville now, and we don't have all the facts just yet.
I would agree, but on the other hand, I thought Donald Trump, he should have been a little more forceful. Even stating that, well, what happened was a domestic incident of terrorism when you have a young man using his car to run over people. If he would have even mentioned that, I would have been very happy. But
well,
right
you
now,
see, that's a good example of not opening your mouth until you have all the facts, because apparently a video just surfaced showing this guy driving his car normally and safely and then being attacked by a bunch of Antifa with baseball bats, and they started pounding on his car. So, yeah, he gunned it to get out of there, and apparently that's when the accident happened. We don't really know what's going on. But it's looking more and more like Antifa were out there trying to get the violence going rather than the people who were defending the Robert E. Lee statue.
I agree, because they seem like their agenda really changed overnight. So, well, Michael, thank you very much. You take care, and God bless.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. And by the way, let's be very careful. Let's be very careful throwing around labels about white supremacist or white nationalist. These are things that are being thrown on to these individuals by the media. The argument is over the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee. And regardless of how you feel about him, he's a part of history. And these are people who are simply protesting, saying, we don't want the statue to go away. It's part of our history. It's part of our heritage. And yes, he was on the losing side of the war. But they don't really want it to be torn down. They don't want to have history decided by a mobocracy, where the only history you're allowed to see is history that doesn't offend anybody. And that, of course, won't be history at all. Now, to put this all in context, let me share an analogy with you. Back in the 1490s, the church tortured my ancestors to convert them to Catholicism. Now, does that give me the right to run around town demanding that all the churches and cathedrals be torn down? And, of course, the answer is no, it doesn't. History is history and should not be subject to populist editing. But that's what's been going on with these globalists who want to erase our history and our cultural heritage to make us easier to control. They want to get rid of all symbols of the Confederacy. Now they're starting to talk about wearing the stars and stripes is now racist. So it's going way, way beyond that. Now, getting on back to what happened in Charlottesville, apparently over on Fox News, that apparently the police were pulled out of Lee Park after the violence started. And we're saying we're leaving, it's too dangerous. It almost reminds me of the run-up to the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. They got out of control because the LAPD left and just let them do what they were going to do, which is why I'm getting a sinking feeling this was allowed to get out of control for news value, for political value, for whatever. And, of course, everybody is pounding on this for their own particular agenda. The mayor of Charlottesville is trying to draw a direct line between the Trump campaign and white supremacists. And, yeah, they're trying to make a big deal about the KKK and David Duke and the rest of it. But you need to go on back to basically two things. The argument is over people who do not want their history erased because some other group is demanding it. And two, it does appear that Antifa was the initiator of all the violence here. So we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I think your previous caller is totally wrong. Trump said the first time all groups got to slow it down, because as soon as he came out the second time, he lost ground. You cannot back up with these people. You have to take 2 steps forward. If you take 1 step back, they take 10 forward. The people, the car gunned it because they're throwing rocks, and you see in the video, like you said, clubs and bats, and they're not on their way to a baseball game. You know, I mean, if you're surrounded by people who are throwing rocks and clubs and bats, what are you going to do? Get out of your car? I mean, common sense.
Yeah.
You're not. You know, so you're going to use that to get the heck out of there. And by the way, that woman who was killed, the pink-haired or purple-haired woman, I don't know if anybody was reading her Twitter feeds or Facebook or whatever. I don't go on there, but from what I saw, she seems like, isn't she white? She hates white people, and she thinks white people should be getting rid of them. So that's the kind of woman that was in that group.
Well, that doesn't that doesn't justify her being killed, but it does look like it was an accident. It wasn't a deliberate attempt to murder somebody. And again, with the surfacing of this latest video, the story has changed completely. We don't have all the facts, but that's not stopping people from going on out, like I said, and pounding their agenda on it. And amazingly enough, over at the IB Times in Great Britain, they're talking about how this James Fields had gone to the Dachau Nazi camp, and that's where he became a Nazi and a white supremacist. And yet there's another story out there saying that, yes, he was on prescription antidepressants. But again, looking at this new videotape, it looks like a guy who just got scared because his car came under attack. And
but it's not.
Go ahead.
It's not like for the people marching. It's for the Civil War Memorial, but it's more than that. It's about keeping your culture. You're absolutely right, though. This is about getting rid of the culture in America and replacing it with a globalist no culture. That's what this agenda is about in the world.
Yes.
But you see that going on with the migrants in Europe. It's a very easy thing to see if people just do a basic 10-minute research.
Yeah.
But this is going to continue, Mike, and it's going to get worse, and it's not going to get better. I hate to tell people that, but it's not going to get any better because these people don't want Trump in there, and Trump, sure, he makes a lot of mistakes, and he's not perfect. Who is? But can you imagine when he wins the next election what's going to go on if we're still around?
Well, I don't. That's a long way down the road here, but I mean, you hear some of the rhetoric that's out there on the Twitter feeds and Facebook, and you realize we are definitely heading into the same crisis that hit Zimbabwe, where all of a sudden it's socially acceptable to be discriminating against white people, to attack white people, to openly call for their genocide. And again, look what happened in Zimbabwe. There was a complete reversal where the government took all the farms and the factories and everything away from their original white owners and gave them to the black people and said, here, you're now all equal. And then, of course, a year later, Zimbabwe was in terrible trouble because the people they'd given the farms and factories to didn't know how to run them.
Yeah, it comes down to where they're just going to do a scorched earth policy, it seems like. That's what it's coming down to. It's a scorched earth policy. They don't care less about the protesters. They just care less about that globalist, no culture agenda. And like I said, it's going to continue and it's going to get worse. This is just the start, believe it or not, Mike.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right here,
Thanks, Mike.
and thank you very much. We're going to let you go. I think the idea is that rather than have the American people angry with the government, this is classic divide and conquer. And by the way, they were doing exactly the same thing back in the 1960s as part of the FBI COINTELPRO. When all Americans were starting to unite together against the war in Vietnam, the FBI deliberately fanned up racial anger in our society. They had the Black Panther coloring book. They infiltrated the Black Panthers, turned them violent. When the Black Panthers first formed, what they wanted were guaranteed breakfast for school kids in the ghetto, local control of the school curriculum. Doesn't sound very violent or radical to me. But they got infiltrated by the FBI and turned violent. So the media could say, oh, fear the black people. Cling to Big Daddy government. We'll save you from those nasty black people. And again, dirty tricks like the Black Panther coloring book. So they're doing the same thing all over again. But there is so much anger and rage in our society from years of economic deprivation across all aspects of our society that, yeah, it could spin out of control very easily indeed. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And obviously what was happening over the weekend happened in a lot of places, not just Charlottesville. They're the focus. It's where it began. But apparently there was a confrontation between the Black Lives Matter people and the police out in Seattle, various other communities across the country. And now they're planning to have yet another rally over in Boston. And, of course, Boston is saying, no, you won't. You are not welcome here with all the violence and vandalism and the rest of it. And we want to be very careful. Antifa supposedly stands for anti-fascist. And yet their agenda seems to be a distillation of fascism. Ignore the election, do what you're told. So people are throwing these labels around fast and loose. They're just looking for anything that sounds good, that's going to get popular support, even if it's completely inaccurate. Okay, we got a whole bunch of phone calls, so let's start with Richard in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. It seems that the Charlottesville incident may have served a dual purpose, take attention away from us changing our game plan with North Korea, and trying to save face by taking attention away from that. But it seems that the more information that comes in, it was very much a honey trap, for anyone supportive of the just free speech in general, and anyone that's been affiliating themselves with alt-right or the Patriot movement. I sent you an email. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it with some video clips, but Daniel Freiberg, I've had on my show, interviewed him last summer, and he's of the Swedish alt-right. Actually, he merged now with Richard Spencer of the American alt-right, alt-right.com. But these words are really thrown around like Nazi and white supremacist. And hate groups. It's not at all the case. I have a little video clip I sent you that shows how he and his friend were maced, actually, themselves, and just tried to report from their hotel room afterward. And it was basically where the police pushed the two groups together. Before it began, a state of emergency was declared, and therefore it was an unlawful assembly. They declared martial law before it even began. No one had a chance to speak. And the police wound up pushing, basically bulldozing the alt-right supportive groups and the Antifa groups together, rather than we would expect, which is, to separate them and have one leave in one direction, the other leave in the other direction. And so, it seems very much like it was orchestrated to cause bad press.
And, here's the irony. The Antifa and Black Lives Matter people are the ones causing all the violence, and yet the corporate media is out there saying, oh, it's those white nationalists and those white supremacists and those Nazis. And, again, the labels are wholly inappropriate to what the agenda of these groups really are. I don't even like the name alt-right. It suggests that we're somewhere on the fringe. I think we ought to just say, we're conservatives, we're paleocons. But just adding alt to the front of it is an attempt to trivialize and marginalize what is actually, obviously, from last year's election, a majority of the American people.
Michael, there was another orchestrated attack that happened that morning before the Charlottesville event. Red Ice Radio. It's based out of Sweden. They cover a lot of topics in their 10-year history, but in recent years been very supportive of the issues of that many people on the alt-right and patriots as well are concerned about. But they've been labeled Nazi, hate group, white supremacist. Mm-hmm. And anyway, their website was planning to do a live stream of the event. Their entire website was taken down on Saturday. I was going to send you the link to him speaking to his members later, too, for you to check that out as well. But, it's very sincere, and you can see these people aren't hate groups. It's a suppression of freedom of speech, and very much orchestrated. His iPhone got completely wiped out where he had to re-register it, and that happened right before the event started, and also the Red Ice Radio
Boy, that's some pretty intense stuff there. Richard, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials.
Certainly.
We got a whole bunch of people waiting to go on the air. So thank you, Richard. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And obviously, the corporate media, the Charlottesville is a big thing. And I'm watching some of these videotapes, and it looks like a bunch of these Antifa people showed up with these homemade shields and clubs. They were looking for a confrontation. And yet, for the corporate media, it was the patriots, the people who wanted to keep the Robert E. Lee statue. And it's very obvious this thing is just nothing but bias. By the way, somebody wrote in and said that Antifa actually stands for Anti-First Amendment. Yeah, sounds good to me. They don't want anybody's opinion out there but their own. All right, let's grab some more phone calls. Kathleen in Paris, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
In Paris?
Kathleen, are you there?
Hi, Michael.
Ah, there you are.
You hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Well, I was considering that some people were saying that North Korea was really just a distraction and never really a possibility of a war. And so I think that the things that we were supposed to be distracted from was maybe number one is that the Mossad is funding a group in Libya.
Mm-hmm.
That, there's a lot of conflict going on down there in Libya,
mm-hmm.
and that they decided to fund one group. That's great. And we're also not supposed to pay any attention to ISIS in the Philippines. And the newest one today, and I heard this from Israeli News Live, that ISIS, you talked about it last week, that ISIS has turned up in Afghanistan, so
yes.
That's what we expect. But Russia has come in, and yeah. Did you hear about that?
Russia's come in where?
In Afghanistan.
Well, they're being accused of supplying weapons, but I don't think Russian troops themselves are in Afghanistan. Hello?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'm
okay.
just soaking in what you said. That that Russia is saying that they don't appreciate ISIS being supplied.
Well, I can certainly understand that, and we know who's supplying ISIS, not just in Afghanistan, but in Syria and the Philippines and everywhere else. I mean, it's kind of one of those open secrets everybody now understands. Yes, in point of fact, ISIS is a proxy for the United States, the same as Al Qaeda was.
And so we can manufacture ISIS, and then we get to go in. That gives us a license to go in and
exactly right.
Whip up on them.
That's exactly right.
While we in fact miss the target and bomb their infrastructure.
That's exactly right. They were looking for an excuse to go into the Philippines. Oh, there's ISIS. 2 weeks ago, they were talking about letting the Afghan war wind down because we've been there 16 years. And yes, there's still the pipeline and the opium to worry about. But then all of a sudden, ISIS is now in Afghanistan. Oh, we have to escalate there as well. It would be a joke if so many people weren't being killed.
Did you hear about the Mossad funding this group in Libya?
I heard something.
Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I heard something about it. I don't have the details just yet.
So that's interesting.
Yes.
So anyway, those are just the things I think that we're supposed to not be looking at while we're freaking out about North Korea. And
no, I disagree with you on that. I disagree with you on that one. They were trying to sell us the war in North Korea. The U.S. government and corporate media were trying to mount this idea to try and get popular support for an invasion of North Korea because there's all kinds of rare earth minerals up there and more opium, and they couldn't get traction. The American people are just sick and tired of war, and because the independent media is so good at spotting the false flags, I don't think they're seeing that as an option right now. Of course, it all depends on how desperate they're going to get.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, they're attempting a regime change right in America.
Well, yeah, they're trying to they want Trump out there. They're trying to do a regime change down in the Philippines. And it does almost seem like the deep state has abandoned any idea of a national allegiance. It's just the deep state and the rest of the world. And they're on the march trying to get their new world order going. Okay?
And it's following the same playbook as all the other regime changes. It's amazing.
Yeah, they've got one script that they're following, and even though people are now picking up that this is what they're doing, they're just going to keep on doing it. And I guess the attitude is they don't care that we see what's going on because they don't think we're going to be able to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Mike.
All right, well, thank you, Kathleen. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you, Michael. Very good day. And Michael, what you said earlier about Soros is a lot behind a lot of this nonsense is absolutely true. But, Mike, let's look back what happened in Dallas, Texas a year ago when 5 white officers were murdered by a Black Panther, and the media didn't do hardly crap about that. But they want to talk about this Charlottesville. And let me tell you this, when you talk about anti-right and anti-left, well, the anti-right happens to be the majority. And I always thought the majority rules. And you got these anti-left, they're militant. You got a lot of illegals. Who knows in this anti-left group that they got in this country who they are? You know, you got Michael. We had 3 murders yesterday here in South Florida. There's guys from Chicago called, and I wonder how many murders they had in Chicago yesterday. They had 3 African Americans got murdered at a drag strip or drag way, or I don't know what the heck they call it. These people call it a thug way, whatever. They had 3 murders over there by a black over there in Milwaukee. The media, that should be talked about every day. But no, they want to talk about this, what's going on in Virginia here. And the governor's saying, all the people, he's basically telling all white people to get out of Virginia. I mean, this is unbelievable what's going on here.
It really is. And, hang on a second before you go further. We have seen for many, many years, there's a very obvious bias in the corporate media on the reporting of crime, where black-on-black crime is not reported, black-on-white crime is not reported, but if it's a white-on-black crime, it's going to get the banner headline treatment.
Absolutely. Michael, why are they blaming the white nationalists for the helicopter that crashed? The helicopter crashed because the white nationalists shot the helicopter down? They got 2, I'm sorry about the 2 troopers who died, but the helicopter pilots, but what did that have to do with the guy ramming his car because they were trying to kill the guy with baseball bats?
Well, it doesn't matter. The media spin is going to be no matter what happens, it's Trump's fault and it's Trump supporters' fault. And they're going to use smear words like white nationalist or white supremacist or Nazi. And the rationale seems to be, well, if those gosh darn white people hadn't made a big stink about keeping that Robert E. Lee statue, those police officers wouldn't have been up in the air in the helicopter and they wouldn't have crashed. Yeah, they would have crashed on the next flight because as near as I can tell, it was a mechanical failure.
Exactly. And, Michael, there's a few other things that I don't want to get off track too much, but because I know the other callers will listen. First off, I don't know what the Zionists do stand for. They are a race, a religion, or an attitude, but I can tell you this, Michael, what's going on with the corporate media and all these lies that are being perpetrated is disgusting. You brought it up earlier in the show that this is all about protecting the statues in Virginia of Robert E. Lee and the Confederacy. This is how, and the guy who actually, I guess, organized, and he didn't even get a chance to speak because they were trying to kill him, the guy that set this up. Did they know that this was going to be this kind of numbers of protesters? I don't know if they did, but to me, this is all, like you say, to get away from what's going on in Korea. This is nothing but a setup by Soros and all those leftist insanity people. And they're, like I said, Michael, they're the minority. They're not the majority. Okay?
Yes.
The problem is the asphalt's telling the gasoline what to do in this country. That's the problem with this country right now. The asphalt is telling the gasoline what to do. That's the way I look at this.
That's a good phrase. I like that. I really like that one.
Well, you got it, Michael. And, like I said, what's going on here is absurd. You got, and they're blaming Donald Trump for this and that. I mean, unbelievable what's going on here. I mean, look what's happened when Obama was in there. All the craziness was going on with Obama. Look at Ferguson. Look at all these. I mean, look at all these cities are in flames. Look at Baltimore. Look at Miami. We have a big problem, Michael. They keep it out of the news, actually. We have a big gang problem here in South Florida. You have gang problems in New York. Look at Long Island. You got gangs running all over. I mean, you got these illegal. Michael, if I'm not mistaken, I heard there's 100,000 illegal gang members in Los Angeles alone that are illegally in the country.
Boy, that's an army.
That's not on the news every day. What's that?
I said that's an army.
That's an army, Michael. It's over 100,000 gang members that are illegally in this country in one city alone. We're not talking Chicago or Baltimore, or Philadelphia. We're talking L.A. We're not talking Seattle. You look at these sanctuary cities, Michael. What is that? That's called breaking the law. You're not following federal law. When Trump says you're not going to get no more money, you got this guy, Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, saying he's going to sue Trump. He should be put in jail. That should be the news right now. CNN.
He should. He's clearly in violation of Title VIII.
All these mayors should be put in jail. The mayor here in South Florida, Jimenez, he caved in. He said, you know what? Trump is right. There's no sanctuary here in South Florida. But you got mayors in Baltimore. You got L.A., you got Chicago. These mayors, that's what the real news. It ain't about what's going on in Virginia and that McAuliffe imbecile, that's a Clinton lackey. Come on, Michael. This is all about these mayors should be. Donald Trump right now should pardon Joe Arpaio. He should get a pardon. And all these mayors should be rounded up or not going by federal statute. They should be rounded up and put in jail. That's what the media should be paying their attention to, not what's going on in Virginia because some guy ran his car because they were trying to kill the guy. If he would have got out of his car, they would have killed him.
Yeah, absolutely.
More likely. Now let's see what the defense is going to be for that guy.
You know, when you're talking baseball bats, you're talking about broken windows, shattered glass flying all over the place. I mean, yeah. He hit the gas pedal because he felt he was under threat. And that's why I said before, absolutely. You know, we have to pay attention and get all the facts because apparently the fact that he was being attacked didn't really come out until earlier today. And certainly the corporate media
they're using this. They're using this to cover up the sanctuary city crap that's going on because they know that by law, Donald Trump has the power to put those mayors in jail. By law, because they're breaking federal law. And, Michael, like when you come here illegally in this country, you are breaking the law.
Yes, you are. You are, absolutely. The instant you set foot over that border, you are in violation of the law. And this is not racism because illegal is not a race.
That's correct, Michael. Thank you. And one more thing about what's going on here with this whole deal with all these. You don't see none of those guys who are in that rally on the right were having baseball bats and all that. Look at the video. These people on the altar left, they're very violent. They're very ruthless. The ones what do they want to say, the Klan and Nazi, they didn't have a bunch of weapons. They didn't have, except the kid had the guy was driving the car. He's a young kid, 20 years old, driving the car.
Yeah, but like I said, Tom, we're going to wrap this up here a little bit. But like I said, looking at the videos, the Antifa people showed up with homemade wooden shields and clubs. They came there looking for a confrontation, and yet the corporate media and the politicians, it's all the fault of those white people and this fixation on Robert E. Lee. And as I said, no, Tom, we have a rule here to kind of sort of like get away from the one more thing. But like I said earlier in the show, if you erase history because somebody somewhere's feelings are bad about it, you're not going to have any history at all. And that, of course, goes right back to 1984. When you erase the past, people don't have a foundation on which to make judgments about the present. And that's exactly what's going on here. And like I said, in the 1490s, the church tortured my ancestors to convert them to Catholicism. Does that give me a right to demand that all churches and cathedrals be torn down? No, it does not. Because history is not subject to majority vote here. Tom, we're going to let you go here. We got a bunch of calls waiting online.
Great show.
All right, thank you. Steve in California, aloha. Steve, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Well, I agree with your assessment on the paid provocateurs to take our mind off the North Korea and save face. But you had a caller talking about why David Duke was on the premises, and I think you're right about the media labeling this, trying to combine or at least associate being the same thing as white nationalist and KKK and white supremacist. Well, David Duke is not the same man he was as a young man, where he was, involved with the KKK. I've listened to him. He's a sharp man. He is equal rights for all. But I think what he does stand for is, and I stand for too, is to maintain my heritage, for God's sakes. We're seeing our heritage, our language disappearing, our culture disappearing, and he's simply saying we need to stand up or it would be gone if we allow that to happen. And that's what he stands for. So I don't know why the media continues to say he is a white supremacist, and he's not. But they don't talk about Senator Byrd and other politicians who were involved with the KKK. But for some reason, their involvement with the KKK is abolished. It's out of the question. It's not even mentioned anymore. It's like it just didn't even happen. And so David Duke continues to carry his past with him to the day he dies.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes. And to be very honest, I think David actually did a disservice by showing up in Charlottesville, knowing that the media was going to use his past to try and say this is all the KKK. And by the way, there were signs at this Charlottesville rally where they're out there screaming about the KKK and all the rest of it. This really does feel like it's being fanned up intentionally. It's a continuation of what we saw in places like Baltimore. They really do want to get a race war or a civil war going, because then they can declare a national emergency and say, all right, everybody, turn in your guns, turn in your gold, and we're going to get rid of that silly little Constitution and Bill of Rights thing.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, I don't know if you watch RT News on a regular basis, but on RT News today, it was headline news. Watch the first 5 minutes of the RT headline news today, and they'll show a comparison of Republicans versus Democrats, how Republicans handle issues, how Democrats handle issues with violence. It was very, very interesting. It's only 5 minutes into the broadcast. I suggest you watch that, and maybe the listeners watch that. RT News, headline news, the first 5 minutes. It shows a comparison. It's very, very embarrassing that the mob rule mentality is the Democrat Party.
Yes.
And watch that. And then one other thing, on the website of RBN, I just found it was really interesting to point out that John had put an article on there about Henry Kissinger had made a quote saying the United States should not eliminate ISIS. I thought that was rather interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the United States needs ISIS. They need ISIS to pop up in any place they want to send troops into, Afghanistan, Philippines, and so forth and so on. And when the Soviet Union fell, they were joking with the U.S. government. We're doing absolutely the worst thing that could ever be done to you. We're taking away your enemy.
Right. Take away the excuse. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take a break for commercials. More calls when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. This is getting really kind of ugly out there. Up in Illinois, the Senate yesterday passed a resolution declaring white nationalists to be domestic terrorists, even though looking at the video, it's the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa people who were committing or initiating the violence. So this is getting out of control here. We are headed right into Zimbabwe territory here. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Sherry in Fredericksburg, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thank you. Look, it's to me, it's not just about preserving our history. It's about preserving the truth. It's about knowing the good, bad, and the ugly, and not having someone rewrite our history and tell us what they want us to know and what they want us to believe. We were able to end slavery by knowing the truth about it. You know, all those years ago, we'd been lied to, and when we finally could overcome slavery, or it became, we could free them when we saw the truth and we could see ourselves as well. And the part we played,
yes,
the immoral part we played. This whole incident provides so many evil opportunities. And I want to know how we're going to deal with this in the future, because I heard even textbooks are being kind of twisted and rewritten so that an agenda can be given to the young growing up, where they can, to me it's a truth issue at the very core. And without the truth, well, it'll set you free, right? That's the saying.
Yes.
And so this is the point I wanted to make, and I want to know how to fight this in the future, because you know this is going to be an opportunity for them to put down the white supremacists, and no one wants racism. No one. We understand now. We see so much more that I don't want them to take it in that direction. You know.
Well, see, here's the problem. Here's the problem. We're going to see mission creep here, okay? Because we're already seeing this kind of rhetoric where all white people are racist and it's just a short step from that to saying all white people are secretly white supremacists or white nationalists. And so you have these laws like the one they're trying to pass in Illinois, basically are trying to reduce white people as an entire population to a subordinate class. And again, we saw the same kind of thing going on over in Zimbabwe. And it is the worst kind of pandering to the crowd by the politicians. But you don't end racism by being racist in reverse. It has never worked out. And it does look like somebody's definitely fanning this up. And I think Soros is behind it. Somebody wrote in to tell me that apparently because David Duke's finances are not all that good, he's now actually taking money from Soros. I don't know that that's true. I haven't gotten a confirmation, but that might explain why he showed up there. Sherry, we're going to have to let you go. We got more callers waiting on the line, and we're going to take a short station identification break. All right, so here we are, hour number 2 of our program. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So let's see. I believe we have Jim in Missouri. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael, and thanks for taking my call. I'd like to set the record straight. I listened to Congressman Duke's show today on Rent, and he had the organizer of the event on as a guest. Congressman Duke was there for the purpose of being a speaker. He was a guest speaker because he is in the middle of all of this litigation and everything, trying to stop the taking down of the Confederate statues and memorials and everything. So that's why he was there.
Okay, good.
They would not let him speak. And actually, the people that have shields were part of the ones that were protesting the removal of the statue, because the Antifa and black rights groups were putting out threats of violence, and so their head of security said, let's bring shields to protect ourselves. And they were beaten on. The anti-protest, whatever you want to call them, Antifa or black rights, they came with bats and bars, and they were throwing feces and urine at them and rocks. David Duke got hit by a rock. And I'm pretty sure that the city was involved with this whole debacle, because they put up barricades right down the middle of the park where the rally was to be held. Instead of putting the barricades next to the street, they put it down the middle so that the people that were there protesting the removal of the statue, they were divided.
All right, well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question here. Which is the group that's always dressed totally in black? I don't know. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I've seen them before. Okay, it's Antifa. I just got that from the control room. Those were the ones I saw with the shields and clubs, the Antifa. On the video that I saw, and maybe the other side brought them as well, but on the video I saw on Fox News, it was the guys who are always dressed completely in black, and they had these shields and these clubs. But as you say, they said we're coming for a violent confrontation. Yes, they did, and that's what they did. But the other side did. They brought shields only, no clubs, shields only. They were in a defensive posture the whole time, and rightly so. So anyway, but that's on rents.com. You can go to the archives for Dave Duke. It was today, this morning, and you can go listen to it for free. All right, well, definitely we'll be doing that. Thank you very much for the phone call here, and we're going to let you go. And let's see, I need to figure out who my next caller is. Oh, okay, Linda in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello, Linda. Are you?
Yeah, I'm talking, but I guess now you can hear me, right?
I can hear you now.
Okay, it just clicked. I I just wanted to add to your recognition of these people gradually destroying our culture or taking it completely away. I was just looking at a magazine that was sent out to people the end of last month for a family fun fair.
Yes.
And it was held in Oberlin, Ohio, and I'm reading down the list, and here they have a committee to abolish Columbus Day. These are one of the organizations participating. A committee to abolish Columbus Day and rename it Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah, that one's been around for quite some time. That's been around for quite some time. Yeah, again, and it's right out of George Orwell's 1984. You rewrite history in order to change people's perceptions today.
I even saw a playground being named something. I believe it was an indigenous playground.
Well, I don't have a problem with somebody building a new playground or putting up a statue to the indigenous Americans. In fact, I don't really think they get as much credit as they're due, for populating this land here. And it's rather interesting. If you go back to Michael Crichton and his book State of Fear, he goes on a very long discourse that when the Europeans showed up here, they thought they were looking at a wilderness, but it was anything but, because the indigenous Americans were basically caring for the land. And they would create meadows, and they would create these other little areas for game to collect in to make their lives a lot easier. We had the same thing here with the native Hawaiians before the Europeans showed up, where they were into fish farming and building these amazing fish ponds all over. And the Native Americans did a lot that changed the face of the North American continent before the Europeans ever got there. So I don't have a problem with somebody creating something new and saying we're going to honor the indigenous Americans, but I do have a problem with a group of people getting together and say, well, we don't think that this holiday or this statue or this monument should be here, and so we're going to have it torn down, and we don't care what anybody else thinks about. Like I said, history should not be subject to a popular vote.
Okay, thank you for the comparison. Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Butch in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You said you lived in Seattle one time, right?
Well, outside of Seattle, North Bend.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm saying that or asking that is I used to live in Seattle until about 96. And in the Fremont district, which is just north of downtown Seattle, they have a statue of Vladimir Lenin.
Yes.
And it's about the size of a hand up on a pedestal. I wonder when the Antifa are going to take them guys out, seeing this, well, they're Jewish, and they started the Bolshevik Revolution, communism, and you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see exactly. I see what you're saying exactly. I'll go one better on you. You know, in New York City's Central Park, there's still a statue to John Wilkes Booth.
Is there no hypocrisy anymore?
Well, they put up the statue before he had that little disagreement with Abraham Lincoln when he was a very, very famous actor.
All I'm saying is we know who's behind all of this, and, you know, come on, people, wake up, all right? It's in your Bible, Genesis 27:40. That's where it starts, okay? Esau and Jacob's blessing. There you go. Start from there. Talk to you later, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for taking my call. I had some observations. There are a lot of people across America, that are classified as white that feel disenfranchised. They feel discriminated, and they feel like, there's basically a war being waged against them, and I would agree with that.
Yes.
The thing about Dr. David Duke is it doesn't matter, who. I mean, yeah, I agree. He's got the baggage and everything, KKK. But the thing is, it doesn't matter who had been brought in as a speaker. They would have been demonized anyway. It doesn't matter because the mainstream media, they demonize any white person or white group stands up for itself and seeks just to look after its own rights when they feel like they're being displaced and put upon. And you can't win. If you're white, you can't win. If you're any other group, you can talk about your rights and look out for your own interests and get together and speak and have speakers and whatnot. But, we also have to remember the same people that are demonizing David Duke and these people as white supremacists. And I don't agree with that. I talked to some of these people, and I think people would be surprised. They're really not white supremacists, and most of the ones I talk to, they don't hate black people. They're just about.
No, they're being demonized. They're being demonized and smeared for opposing the New World Order.
White nationalism, for the most part, is a defensive position. These guys feel like they have nowhere else to go. But the people that are demonizing them are the same people that did 9/11. And the same people behind ISIS. These are the ones that are orchestrating the demonization of white people that are standing up for themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and again, we see the bias all the time. If you have Hispanics getting together and lobbying for special legal privileges and protections, it's called Hispanic power. When the blacks get together and they lobby for special legal protections and advantages, it's called black power. When white people get together to do the same thing, all of a sudden they're racists.
I don't think most of the people that went to the rally that would be deemed, that they're being called white supremacists. I don't think most of those people went with the idea, we want violence. But I think because of the history of the Antifa, and those are the ones that wear the black, all black and whatnot, and people, some of the stuff they were sneaking in as coolers and inside of coolers, they should not have been able to do that. The police obviously were told to stand down and allow that. And I hate to say it, but they were throwing used condoms, dirty tampons, plastic containers full of urine, feces. I mean, these are very violent, very disgusting people. And the people that went for the rally, as far as supporting the Robert E. Lee monument, they took shields because they know what's happened in the past. These guys are the Antifa people are very, very violent. The word was they were going to be throwing some very, very deadly stuff. I mean, water bottles filled full of concrete. Okay, and I saw some of that in some of the video or some of the TV footage I saw. I saw some of the Antifa sneaking through the lines and throwing, bottles. I mean, you take one of those to the head, that could kill you.
Yes.
They go up with chain bike locks and sneak up behind people, hit them in the back of the head. If I had gone to it, I would have taken a shield if I could have got my hands on one and a helmet. But those are defensive. Those are only defensive. I'm not aware of any of the pro Robert E. Lee statue people taking weapons. I've not heard of that.
No, and again, they're being demonized because the fact of the matter is that if you took your average American and you sat them down and you said, this is a piece of history, and yes, they lost the war, but it is a part of our American history. Do you agree with it being torn down just because some whiners don't like it? Most Americans would say no. History is our collective heritage. So in order to get what they want, because they can't win the argument through facts, logic, or law, that's when they resort to violence. And it's like that earlier caller was saying. If you look at how Republicans are handling the debate, they're talking. They're trying to make sense. They're trying to be logical. And the Democrats know they can't win on that particular front, so they resort to violence. And they've been doing it ever since Hillary lost that election.
Don't you agree, though? They were in a no-win situation as far as public relations. So what's the problem with having Dr. David Duke there? He's one of the strongest, most intelligent, fact-based speakers on our side. So why?
Well, he's very good. I've had him on the show here and everything. And now that I understand that he's in the middle of the lawsuits to try and preserve that statue, well, then yes, obviously he needed to be there. And so the corporate media, again, they're not going to talk about he's part of the legal fight to preserve this history as our common heritage. You're going to say, oh, he's with the KKK. He's this and he's that.
Thanks for the time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha, Snack Bar.
Oh, now you get cute, will ya? Okay, that works. Anyway, obviously this whole weekend has been an absolute whatever you want to call it, so
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. Of the research I've done or tried to get done and have come up pretty much empty or short or whatever the case is, I've been trying to research what was the intended purpose of taking down the statuary, for that matter, where it was being moved to, if at all, and if it was for improvement or whatever the case was, and that sort of thing, because you generally just don't take down statuary that's carved stone unless you're planning on moving it or possibly replacing it with a more updated one, perhaps.
Well, in this case, it's a stone pedestal, and I think it's a bronze statue. And what the people who want it removed is they don't care where the stone goes, and they want the statue itself melted down. They want it gone. They don't want it to go anywhere. They don't want it to be in existence anymore.
So it was not a matter of replacing it with another one or relocating it to a more interesting place of reverent standing or whatever, for that matter. It was just purely, okay, I gotcha.
Okay.
Now, I know a lot of people probably thought that, well, the governor was a real traitor or whatever, but you know something? There was several comments that the governor had made that was actually very legitimately true, and I was stunned to hear it.
Yes.
And a lot of people are going to think that, well, I'm starting to pot and I'm just a typical, whatever you want to call it. That's fine. At least to give me some dignity while you call me that. When he goes and makes a comment about indigenous Native Americans that resided here to start with, regardless of where they came from, and of course everybody else that arrived afterwards that are also immigrants and all that, saying that there is no place for hate and no place for violence there in Virginia where it occurred, I have to agree with him. Now, a lot of people I've heard so far say that, well, he basically said that white people should take and leave Virginia. No, that's not what he said. He said there's no place for violence and no place for hate.
Yes.
You know what? I have to advocate that thought. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background is, let alone what your sex is. I mean, I've seen white women there at the rally of video that people did of the rally, as well as men. So, and on top of that, when they had the fiasco about the young man that traveled from Ohio and did the vehicle deal down through the crowd and basically plowed a lot of people down, I'm sorry. It's very apparent to me that dude was drugged from his mugshot or whatever, unless he was drugged before they took the picture. And so forth, but...
Well, again, there's one story that this guy was on prescription antidepressants, but also, again, earlier today a video came out showing he was under attack. He was driving normally until all of a sudden they started hitting his car with rocks and baseball bats, and he floored it trying to get away from them, and that's when the accident happened.
Well, the question is, then, did he drive into an area that was not marked as no vehicles allowed?
No, there were no signs. The crowd was in the middle of the street. They were on the roadway.
Okay, because generally when you have an area where there is a rally of sorts or a meeting of people, you generally have a roadblock of such to keep vehicles from going in. That goes on in any city, for that matter.
I understand that, but let me give you a hypothetical. Okay, you're in your car, and in front of you is the little sign saying, do not enter, and behind your car are a bunch of people with baseball bats and rocks trying to break through the back window. Are you going to respect that barricade in the front of you?
Yes, I'm going to go backwards because, quite frankly, they're hitting the wrong person.
Well, you make a good point there, except that a lot of these people were off to one side and throwing rocks and everything. If there was an intent to go after them, it's a complex issue. But again, We need to be very careful that we have all the facts before we move forward. And right now, we've got a corporate media that is trying to just churn this thing up as much as possible. Anyway, Francis, we're going to let you go here. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back. We've got another caller waiting on the line. Boy, what a busy day for the switchboard. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phone lines here, had somebody wrote in an email saying that removing statues is the moral equivalent to burning books. Absolutely, absolutely agree with that one. And in reference to an earlier caller on the line, apparently President Trump has told Fox News that he is in fact seriously considering a pardon for Sheriff Joe Arpaio, which would be good. Get him back out there supporting the immigration agenda. All right, let's take a phone call from Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just want to be clear about one thing. The most hateful speech that I've heard in a long time is when Hillary Clinton told the world via the television that Russia hacked our election and that she was willing to use violent force against them because of it. Yet, that server that would prove it to this day has not been inspected forensically.
No.
That is hate. That is hate speech. And I think that we need to stay focused on that. I know what happened this weekend in West Virginia was a tragedy, and we know that it was a lot of misdirection by the deep state, and we need to, we need to take that as a clip in the fourth quarter and keep moving on. We want the server inspected. There should be no excuse that that's not inspected yet. That will tell us who our enemy is, and it's Mrs. Clinton and the people that have funded her. And I'm sick and tired of it. That's what we need to stay focused on every single day.
Well, I'm absolutely, I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement here. And again, we're dealing with what I call the narcocracy. And it's all these people, the Clintons and the Bushes and the CIA and everybody working together with them, who have all become insanely rich by smuggling illegal drugs into this country and selling them. And they solve their conscience by saying, well, we need to do it because we need the money for these covert activities that we're engaged in that Congress has not approved, like the Nicaraguan resupply effort.
That's right. The crimes that they're participating in are humongous compared to the West Virginia protests yesterday, where they're trying to basically make us all look like skinhead KKK members. They're the Nazis. They are the Nazis, and it can be proven that they're the Nazis. All this other stuff, there's no proof. There never has been.
No, again, you're absolutely right. And maybe the reason they were pushing on North Korea, as that first caller today said, was to pull us away from the growing fury around Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Seth Rich, Hillary Clinton, and then it got out of control, and all of a sudden they're looking at a real war, so now they're trying to pull back from North Korea, and they fan up this thing in Charlottesville. Apparently, InfoWars just put up a story where they've got a confirmation. The mayor of Charlottesville ordered the police to stand down and not intervene with this riot.
That's right. I'm sure that's probably true because the deep state has infiltrated every single one of our governments in every state, and all the elite people are the deep state, and they want to just continue with their evil ways. And we need to stand up and say there's evidence that we know of that will prove without a doubt that it was Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and the deep state that accused Russia of something that they did themselves, and they're willing to be violent over it.
And they've already sanctioned Russia over this fairy tale, and Putin knows it's a lie. These people are literally willing to take this country to war to protect the lie that they told. And that is a really reckless, dangerous thing to do. Okay, Alex, we're going to have to let you go. We're going to take another break. 4 commercials. We got more callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I go back to the phones, I got to fit some news in here a little bit. And apparently there's a story just coming on out now. The guy who has organized Unite the Right, okay, Jason Kessler, apparently was an Obama supporter involved in the Occupy movement. So it's the same cast of players. They're just flipping back and forth to try and keep things stirred up. All right, back to the phones here. Miles in Maine. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, another great show. Thanks for your good work.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a couple comments here. You know, it seems to me we had these statutes and monuments up for 150 years, and we never had anybody hurt. And all of a sudden they start this over the past couple years, and people are hurt everywhere. People are assaulting people at different venues where these rallies are and all kinds of things. And, you know, I think it's basically at the feet of these social engineers, these socialist and communist sympathizers and persuaders. And I think a lot of it is mainly that, because as I mentioned, we've had these monuments up 150 years and never had any trouble, so they started all this, we're taking them down. So we have weak-kneed legislators and legislative bodies that allow this stuff, and instead of not compromising, they have, and it's compromised all of us.
Well, again, the goal here is to erase our history to make us easier to control, and it's part of the New World Order agenda, because people who have a strong sense of identity, strong sense of their heritage, their history, their culture, they're much harder to control and brainwash than people who just don't have a clue where they came from or where they're even supposed to be. They're even trying to get us confused over which bathrooms we're supposed to be using.
Yeah, and, you know, I think this altogether ties in with part of this, having this open borders and anything goes and anyone come over. And, you know, one other thing, the lady that called in, she was incorrect. That governor told everybody to go home from the rally, the pro-rally side. He said he didn't want them in their town, and he didn't just blame it on a couple of the people. He told all white people that were there, and surprisingly, well, not so surprisingly, there were black people there that wanted those monuments, too, to stay up. And he told everybody to go home, but, you know, he's a Clinton guy. You know, he's one of Clinton's big cronies, so.
Yeah, I think we're obviously in a time of chaos and confusion. It's almost like the 1980s. We were going through a lot of the same stuff back then, men dressing as women and all the rest of that other nonsense. All right, well, Miles,
absolutely.
I'm going to let you go here, and we're going to go to Tony in Puerto Rico. And Tony, what's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Yeah, Mike, I want to be a little bit more optimistic, change the subject a little bit. I was watching the other night a documentary about JFK on YouTube, and it mentioned that 6 times the generals tried to push him towards war, and he refused. Now, my question is this. Why did he refuse? Because of experience in the Pacific, or was he just a natural peacemaker?
I think a little bit of both here. I mean, if you go back and you look at the history of American presidents, you will find that those presidents who actually served in combat, by and large, want to avoid war. And I think the best example of that would be General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the supreme Allied commander for the war in Europe, and he became one of the most anti-war presidents we've ever had. He sounded the warning on the military-industrial complex. And if you look at the presidents who are all gung-ho to have a war, you find out these are the guys who got an exemption from the draft, or they got to serve in the Air National Guard and, have a lot of fun flying jets around. But they never really had to risk that actual combat situation. Now, there are exceptions in both directions, but it's a general pattern that follows. The other part of it, of course, was that Kennedy was a peacemaker. And he actually did want to pull back from the Cold War with the Russians. In fact, at one point, when the space race was cranking up, Kennedy wanted to call off the race to the moon, and he wanted to approach the Russians and say, let's just go together. It's going to cut the cost in half for both of us, and we'll just go up there together, and we'll plant both flags, and we'll all be happy. And, of course, the Cold Warriors around Kennedy hated that idea. They needed to demonize Russia and keep them the villain so that they could extract more money out of the pockets of the American people, just like they are doing today.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Oh, boy, a lot of phone calls. The lines are open right now, and I'm going to take this opportunity to get some news in there. Let's see. Article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Is there an obstruction of justice taking place in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation? And basically, they're going back to last May, where Kim.com posted a statement to his website claiming to have information relevant to the investigation into the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. Kim.com claimed he had proof that Seth Rich was the source of the 2016 Democratic National Committee email leak. And he's willing to provide that evidence, and Mueller has simply not responded. And Kim.com is trying again, sending communications through his lawyers, but Mueller's not interested. We already know it was the Russians. Don't confuse us with the facts. Still a problem with leakers over at the White House. Now they think that Bannon may be one of the leakers. And if you look at how Bannon was treated, I can imagine he's a little grumpy about what happened to him here. Story out of Sky News. People in the White House are working to eject Donald Trump. Again, going back to John F. Kennedy, he's surrounded by enemies on all sides. And he doesn't really know that they're enemies. And this is where my concern about his naivete, making the transition from business to politics, is really showing up, because he came into the White House thinking that I'm the boss, I'm signing their paychecks, they will be loyal to me. That's generally how it works in business. Not always, but generally. Washington, D.C., completely different. Everybody is compromised, everybody's being blackmailed, everybody's got secrets to hide. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the House Judiciary Committee asked for a second special prosecutor to investigate Clinton, Comey, and Lynch. And so far, no response from the Department of Justice. We're not interested in investigating anything other than Donald Trump and Russia. Don't bother us with all this other evidence. Now, as I mentioned before, I think we're getting set up for a little bit of a limited hangout. As you know, there's a report, some kind of a deal is being made with Hillary Clinton where she will confess to a minor crime, a misdemeanor, which would not keep her out of future attempts at the White House. And in exchange, the Department of Justice will end the investigation into the email server, as well as all investigations into the Clinton Foundation. That's a heck of a deal. And I think the only reason they're doing that was because of all the people who are out there saying, with all this evidence of wrongdoing by the Clintons, why the obsessive, compulsive focus on Russia and Trump? So they're going to get Hillary to sign this little thing and then officially end all the other investigations. And they're going to say, well, we investigated. We did investigate here. Look, she admitted to committing this misdemeanor. Now we have to go back to Russia and Trump and stop complaining about how we run things here. So let's go over to the war zones. A lot of stuff going on. Obviously, we are very glad that, at least in some quarters of the U.S. government, they do seem to be very slowly stepping back from North Korea. Now, if we could just get Kim Jong-un to shut his mouth and not inflame things, we might back off from this a little bit. Earlier in the show, I reported this story where U.S. experts are convinced that North Korea's sudden improvement in their missile technology relates to rocket engines illegally purchased from Ukraine. Ukraine is now formally denying that. Who, us? We would never do anything like that. So we'll see what's going on. Over in Syria, the area held by the Syrian government has grown by 250% over the last 2 months. They are winning that war. And absent the United States finding some new excuse to go back in there, start flinging cruise missiles all over the place, Syria is going to remain the property of the Syrian people. Now, apparently, Es-Sukne in Syria has been liberated. This apparently is the last stop before an actual attempt to liberate Deir ez-Zor. So they're making great, great guns here, over there. Gains, rather, over there. Now, interestingly enough, Russia is offering a helping hand to Iraq to restore the electric system in Mosul. Mosul has just been absolutely devastated in this fight to take it back from ISIS. And Russia's coming on in and saying, we're going to help you get set up with a new power plant distribution. We're going to get you back online here. Now, U.S. officials are getting ready to start sending more and more weapons into Ukraine under the idea that this will put pressure on Russia. And again, it's a provocation. And again, they're trying to get Russia to make that first overt move. We know our government is desperate for a war. They're desperate for anything that will distract from the coming economic crash. The enemy of the American financial system is the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan, and they really feel they need that war. But as always, they got to make it look like it's the other guy's fault. Oh, Russia sank the Lusitania. China blew up the USS Maine. Whatever excuse they're going to use. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military has been violating the ceasefire in the Donetsk Republic, and they've had more than 20 violations so far, according to the OSCE. Again, poke, 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 waiting for a reaction. Apparently, there's been another possible ISIS attack in Iraq. 2 U.S. soldiers killed, 5 more wounded. So what's going on over there? Well, we know that they're talking about redrawing the map of the Middle East, because we can't let those people decide their own borders. I mean, where's the fun in that here? And apparently ExxonMobil, the Koch brothers, Israel, are all pushing on Washington to partition Iraq and Syria, split them up into little, tiny, easy-to-push-around pieces. And we know that's been part of the plan all along. Meanwhile, the U.S. has just announced that they're going to build permanent military bases in Iraq. No big deal, just like we have in Germany and Japan. We're going to stay there forever and make sure that they don't think unpleasant thoughts about us. All right, we're going to take a phone call. John in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Quick thing. I just want to say, basically, every race can, every person that's not white, the blacks, the Mexicans, they can always talk about, their pride. And
yes.
God forbid, whites basically, hey, respect us, and they're all called Nazis. It's a joke, that's all, Mike.
Yeah. No, it's a very, very valid point. You can have any one of these ethnic groups get together and say, we're showing black pride or Hispanic pride or gay pride or whatever. But white people get together and say, we're proud of our heritage. Look at what we've built here. And, oh, you're a racist. You're a white supremacist. You're this and you're that. And you're right. It's an absolutely hypocritical approach. Why can't white people feel proud of what they have done?
Don't be a racist, Mike. You're a racist.
Yeah, well, what can I tell you?
That's all, Mike. Thanks, buddy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. That's funny. I never really thought of myself as being white. I'm kind of a Heinz 57 variety with a mutt mixed background. All righty. Now, let's see. Yes, Netanyahu was out there backing partitioning Iraq and justifying it with a Kurdish state. What he really wants, though, is Iraq in several pieces that will not be able to stand up to Israel as Israel moves forward with Eretz Israel, the Greater Israel Project. However, it may not be as easy because apparently Russia is now sending T-80 battle tanks to the Iraq government. And Russia's saying they had a previous contract. There's nothing new about this, so nobody can complain. But those T-80s, those are formidable. Those are going to be hard to get around. Meanwhile, relations between Israel and Jordan are not doing all that well. And it goes all the way back to this incident where there was a security guard who shot two Jordanians. And Israel is refusing to investigate and prosecute. Jordan kicked the Israeli delegation out and says, you're not coming back until this guard is brought to trial. Now, Israel is saying he was being attacked. Jordan is saying, no, this guard just hauled off and shot people, which they're in the habit of doing, as you see down in Gaza here. Meanwhile, Israel's got another problem because apparently there's a new report out showing that they've got a big issue with desertion in the occupied lands. These Israeli soldiers who are stationed in the West Bank, they have a tendency to just go walkabout and abandon their duties without permission. So I think Israel's government has lost the illusion of having a moral right to be there, at least among their own military. Remember, this all goes back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War, where you have to have a military that believes in the moral rightness of what they're doing and a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of what they're doing. And Israel seems to have lost both of those, just like our U.S. government has lost the illusion of moral rightness in all of these wars, both among our military and our civilian population. Now, do you remember that brief interval where Tony Blair was this Middle East peace envoy? You know, huzzah, huzzah. Well, the Sunday Telegraph is revealing apparently he was being very well funded by a wealthy Arab state when he was out there. And apparently Blair was getting funding from Abu Dhabi, which says, did this guy have a conflict of interest? Yeah, I think so. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, talking about the international scene in the war. Apparently, Iran's parliament have just voted to boost their missile production, which, of course, was this big issue with Donald Trump saying, well, this is not in the spirit of the P5+1. How dare they make missiles to shoot at us when we invade them? So the Iranian parliament basically has voted to boost missile production and apparently emphasized the point by chanting death to America after the vote. Excuse me, I got something caught in my throat. There we are. Tehran is also starting to stretch their military muscle. They're getting ready to deploy some of their warships to the western Atlantic. They're starting to do the same thing with the Atlantic that the U.S. is doing in the South China Sea. We have a right to go where we want to go. And it almost looks like Iran is looking at how the situation with Kim Jong-un and North Korea ended and realized that standing up to the bullying may be a better way to go. It's a dangerous game. You have to be very careful that you don't do something that allows the United States to justify an attack. But it's another signal that the American empire is very much in decline. Now, Mike Pence is down there touring around South America. Venezuela is a hot topic. Pence is defending Donald Trump's military threat against Venezuela. Now, again, remember, the head of the CIA 3 weeks ago admitted that everything that's been going on in Venezuela is, in fact, another regime change operation. So we know what's going on. Now, today, they're out there trying to fan the flames of war by saying, well, Iran and Hezbollah and the Russians are in Venezuela, and they are a threat to the United States, and that's why we have to invade them, because I guess they're probably getting sick and tired of all these people calling up the White House and saying, what business do we have being in South America? And here's where it gets really interesting. They're out there saying we're going to have to militarily intervene and help the opposition overthrow, regime change Maduro. And interestingly enough, the opposition coalition in Venezuela basically said, no thank you, United States. We don't want you here either. So even the Venezuelan opposition do not want a U.S. military invasion or military solution to Venezuela's current problems, because they're smart enough to understand once the U.S. comes in, nobody wins except the U.S. corporations. Venezuela is also coming on out and saying that the Trump threat of U.S. military intervention shows the madness of U.S. imperialism. And they're absolutely right. And again, anybody who's being objective, anybody who just weans themselves away from those red pills that the blue pills, rather, that TV's putting on out, we know who the aggressor is. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open again, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the situation down in Venezuela, and maybe one reason why the U.S. government is backing off from North Korea is they're beginning to realize they can't fight too many wars at the same time, so they're going to go in for what they think is going to be an easy, quick fight in Venezuela. They'll get that regime changed, and then they'll get around to North Korea later on. Maybe, maybe not. Interestingly enough, Venezuela's Maduro tried to place a phone call to Donald Trump to see if they could talk about sorting this mess out. Trump refused to take the call at all. And he's still standing by his comment that he's going to take unspecified military action against Venezuela, even though both Maduro and his opposition are saying, U.S., stay out. Meanwhile, and things are really bad down there. It's economic war for decades, and it's all about gaining control of Venezuela's oil. They have lines to get things like bread and toilet paper. People are starving. Utilities are down, electricity's out for a lot of the time. They're really hovering on the edge here. But they all understand this has been economic warfare. Now, obviously, our corporate media is saying, well, it's the evils of socialism, and then that's why it's all falling apart. No, it's economic war. There are some countries that are socialists that do very well, like in Europe. Maduro's son is out there saying that if the U.S. takes military action against Venezuela, Venezuela will have no choice but to reciprocate. Now, he's not being any more specific with what he means than Trump is. But again, we're starting to see more and more of these nations just stand up to the bullying. First it was North Korea, then Iran, and now Venezuela. I'm sure the planners in the White House are saying, what do you mean they're standing up to us? They're not supposed to do that. We're the exceptional, indispensable nation. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. I read this story and I think about that old Beatles tune, The Tax Man, which, by the way, the Beatles wrote when they ran afoul of the Internal Revenue Service. And toward the end of their career, they were in this odd situation where the four Beatles could not actually stand in the same place, because some were in trouble in the U.S., some were in trouble in Canada. Everyone kept saying, are the Beatles ever going to get back together? No, they never are. And the reason was all kinds of tax issues that were outstanding. So, as you know, one of the big things that is going on right now is the Airbnb, where people are renting out their homes or part of their homes to vacationers. It's sort of a more flexible, more peer-to-peer version of the bed and breakfast, of which we have we used to have a lot here in Hawaii, not as much anymore. They've gone into decline ever since TSA. Germany and France, however, have decided that it's another taxation opportunity, and we're talking about over and above taxing the income that is coming into their household. They want to have a special surcharge tax for people who rent their houses online. So, again, every time a national economy gets in trouble, what's the first thing they do? Oh, we're going to go out and do another tax here. There's nothing left to tax. That's the problem. There's no new wealth coming into Europe or the United States. And what we have are these various government agencies that are simply fighting over what's left. Now, the rising tension on the Korean Peninsula, which may back off a smidge, but only a smidge, is stimulating interest in precious metals. And apparently sales of gold bars are soaring because everyone understands in the event of war, having some gold, silver, is probably going to be a really, really good idea. Pension funds are still in trouble in the news. Apparently, most pension funds did not generate much of a return in 2016. They're holding their value. In some cases, they actually lost value. So the economy is very, very fragile here. Now, we mentioned this at the top of the show, but we're going to do it again. Trump has warned Xi Jinping that the trade war with China has begun as of today. And again, you have to wonder about the arrogance of the United States, where they're getting ready to have a trade war with China. They're encroaching on the South China Sea. At the same time, they turn around and say, well, you got to help us with North Korea. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Okay, we're going to take some phone calls. Bernie in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call. My wife was on the internet a while ago, and she was talking about the Bundy trial.
Yes.
And I tuned in late. I just got in about a half an hour ago, and you might have talked about this already. I don't know. But she said that there was a fella, and she thought his name was Parker, that was testifying, and the judge he said something that she didn't want him to say, and the judge just got madder than hell, I guess, and walked out of the courtroom, and the jury was just shocked.
I have not heard that one yet. We did have a story on the Bundy trial last week where apparently the reason it's just dragged on as long as it has is they don't actually have any laws the Bundys broke. And the last word was the FBI was trying to find somebody they could put pressure on to testify against the Bundys and basically frame them. You know, like that Romanian hacker, they were going to make him a U.S. citizen if he'd claimed that he was hacking the election for the Russians, or that guy that was in the whole Boston Marathon bombing down in Florida, Ibrahim Todashev, where they were trying to get him to say, to help frame the Tsarnaev brothers, and it wound up getting out of control, and the FBI shot him dead there. So, yeah, this sort of thing goes on. I would be interested in finding out just what did happen and what this guy said. But as I understand it, in terms of the actual letter of the law, it's not going very well for them.
No, it's not. But this judge, in my opinion, she is really something else. I mean, she's not allowing people to testify about things.
Yep.
She's making it rough as hell on him.
Yeah, they are. Well, it's a kangaroo court. It's a show trial at best, but again, we ran the story last week. They don't actually have any evidence that the Bundys broke any laws.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's the sick thing about it. In, 2 years now?
Yeah. So I would be interested to hear what this gentleman said that caused the judge. I assume that the judge just declared a recess. I mean, she didn't just get up and run from the room, did she?
No, she got up and walked out of the courtroom, and the jury was sitting there wondering what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I'd be very curious about what that was all about.
Yeah. Well, you might check it out.
Okay.
Find out what went on. It sounds like she's kind of a nutcase to me.
Well, you know, the government may have something on her, and they simply said, you got to convict these guys, you got to get the jury to convict these guys, or we're going to expose whatever it is she's been doing, and that would put her under tremendous pressure, especially if there is, in fact, no evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the Bundys.
Yeah, well, that's true, but she's sure doing a good job. That's the case.
All right, well, listen, Bernie, thank you very much for that. I'm going to try and look that up a little bit later in the day today. And we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And going back to the phones, Mike in Maryland. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I called into C-SPAN this morning right at 7:30. Mm-hmm. And on their archives, they actually list each individual phone call with the transcript.
Yes.
And guess what? My phone call was scrubbed.
Imagine my shock. What did you share with them?
I'll try to be as verbatim as possible, if I can use that as a verb. Here's the topic, and I'll read it to you. And it was a short conversation. President Trump's remarks on Charlottesville, violence, enough? So that was the topic. And they're totally buying into the corporate media narrative. So I called in, and I said, why don't the Democrats apologize to the Soros-funded terrorist, violence-prone groups like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and La Raza that says for our race, everything, for everybody else, nothing. The C-SPAN is a joke. Mm-hmm. Why don't you? Let me see. Well, okay, I'm kind of drawing a blank, kind of nervous again too. Mm-hmm. But and so it was, boom, that's it. It's deep six.
Yeah, no, I remember one time after the Columbia shuttle crash, and they actually called me up and said, we want to interview you. And it was just one leading question after another to make it sound like I was a kook and a nutcase, which I evaded because of my extensive experience with NASA. But yeah, they're propaganda machines just like anything else that's on that cable box.
Yeah, it's a big disappointment, but at least I got the word out for at least temporarily. So I have pretty good luck getting into C-SPAN, believe it or not.
Well, there may not be a lot of people calling into it anymore because just like the corporate media, people just aren't tuning in anymore.
Well, that could be. I mean, you get calls not only from all over the country, but foreign countries as well. It'd be interesting to see. Oh, well, I want to talk about Venezuela.
Okay.
I'm not going to debate the pros and cons of socialism, but why the heck do we have to stick our nose into other people's business? Let the people of Venezuela decide what kind of government they want. We don't need the CIA coming in with their black ops and wet works deposing a leader, and we can debate the pros and cons of Maduro, and put in some kind of puppet that's going to be at the behest of the Zio banksters and the global corporations. I mean, how many doggone countries do we have to meddle in? It's just ridiculous. And I haven't completely jumped off the Trump train, but I tell you, I'm hanging by my fingernails. And it's stuff like this that makes me shake my head and go, what the heck is going on here?
No, I'm in agreement with you on that one. And, of course, U.S. interest in Venezuela predates Maduro, goes all the way back to the days of Hugo Chavez. And, the U.S. corporations do not like socialist governments because you have governments who are spending the country's revenues on the people. And from the American corporate point of view, the idea is that the people should be allowed to basically descend into starvation, and all of the country's wealth wind up in the pockets of the American corporations. That's the deal they had in Cuba under Batista which led to the Cuban Revolution. Same thing with Allende in Chile. That was a socialist government, and Henry Kissinger justified that intervention with this very infamous quote of his about, the issues are far too important to leave up to the Chilean voters. And that's the attitude that we see coming out of Washington, D.C., is they're all in favor of democracy as long as their people get elected.
Yeah, but Chavez's daughter absconded the country with like over $3 billion, and Chavez bragged how the bankers that loaned him the money made huge profits. Anthony Sutton wrote a book how Wall Street funded and put the communists in power in the Soviet Union.
Well, very often what will happen is the U.S. will put a regime in place that solves a short-term problem, and then down the road it becomes an issue. Saddam Hussein is a very good example. The CIA and the U.S. helped Saddam take over Iraq, and then down the road they had to go on in and get rid of him.
Well, sometimes, like I say, sometimes the leaders go rogue, and it's kind of like in ancient Rome, when they had like a governor in Spain, it gets too big for his britches and starts hoarding all the tax money for himself. And then Rome has to send in several legions to put him in his place. It's the same old thing,
Yeah, it absolutely is. And very often, I don't like the phrase going rogue, because very often what you're finding out is these people who are installed as leaders of a country, they start looking around and saying, well, if I'm going to hold on to this job, I got to do things for the people and for the country. I got to make their lives better. And very often that puts them into odds with the U.S. interests. And there's also, of course, the fact that the U.S. will double-cross their own people. When the U.S. installed Saddam Hussein, and then he got Saddam to go after the Iranians, the Iran-Iraq War, and Saddam lost that one, and that was the first strike against him. We're seeing the same thing now with Poroshenko, where he's being a lot less cooperative than when he first took office.
Oh yeah, and especially with Gaddafi trying to help his own people, it's really terrible. I never did see the movie by the heavy-set gentleman who is got an Irish or Scottish name. Who do we bomb next?
Michael Moore. Michael Moore. Yeah, that's
Moore. Yeah.
Okay, Michael Moore. I love some of his work. I hate some of his work. But Who Do We Bomb Next is a good one. And of course, I'm a huge fan of Canadian bacon. But apparently, his one-man stage show in New York, which is a nonstop Trump bash, has been rather badly trounced by the critics.
There's pros and cons to his thing. Well, I don't want to take up too much time, and thank you for letting me vent. You have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. Turning over to the immigration issue, as you know, Germany has now absorbed about as many refugees as they can. They're applying for asylum. The ones who are granted asylum are allowed to stay. The ones who do not meet the requirements, of course, are failed asylum seekers. They are supposed to be deported. Well, Germany is now stuck because the leader of Bavaria is out there saying that they're dealing with 250,000 failed asylum seekers, and it is simply physically impossible to round them up and ship them out of the country. So even the people that the government says shouldn't be there are going to stay there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. James in Japan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, you're going to alienate your listeners. I specifically asked Mike in the control room to refer to me as Jamie from Japan. Every Tuesday I feel very feminine, and I feel like a woman, and I'd like you to call me Jamie because we all know that gender has nothing to do with the biological authoritative package that I was born with.
James, small technical point. Right now where I'm sitting on the other side of the date line, it is still Monday.
I'm in the future, Michael. Hey, Michael, about Korea.
Yes.
Korea. Last time I called, I said I don't think anything is going to happen. I still don't think anything is going to happen.
I hope you're right.
Because North Korea is just too heavily armed with artillery, all aimed at Seoul. And I just don't think that America or Seoul or even Japan, that nobody is going to want to risk this. There's going to be too much death and destruction from it. What do you think?
Well, I'm certainly in agreement. That's a good analysis of it. The problem is that we're seeing our government is badly factionalized. And there is a faction that just wants more war and to heck with what the consequences are going to be. And the big issue is when they talk about a decapitation strike against Kim Jong-un and his nuclear arsenal is they cannot guarantee that they're going to get them all. We've been hearing all these wild speculations about how many warheads he's got. The last number I heard was 60, but nobody really knows, nor do they know where they are. I'm sure by now, whatever warheads Kim Jong-un have been dispersed. And North Korea's got all kinds of tunnels already dug deep into the ground with which to shield their artillery from air attack. Anyway, James, we got to take a break here. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following up on that story about how they've got 250,000 rejected refugees in Germany that they physically cannot round up and send back home. And that is, of course, over and above those refugees who've been granted asylum there. More difficult than that because the birth rate for the people of Europe averages 1.3 children per couple. You know, this idea about replacement of the population and not growing. Muslim families have an average of 3.5 children per couple. So they're already looking at a demographic bomb right in their midst. All right, let's take a phone call. Yvonne in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Yvonne, are you there?
Yes, aloha.
Aloha.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I just wanted to make 2 points about the overuse of the word Nazi. And my first point is that originally when the...
Okay, Yvonne, you're fading out. Yvonne, you're fading out. You got to get your mouth closer to the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay. We defeated the Nazis in World War II. And so originally, when they would call us Nazis, that was a threat. And they were basically saying, do you want to end up like the Nazis? Look what we did to them. So it was meant to put us in our place. If somebody said, you're a Nazi, we were supposed to be afraid. But I think they've overplayed it because...
I agree.
You know, I'm a brown-eyed New Yorker. I'm a liberal, used to be, not an ounce of German blood in my body. And I've been called a Nazi for wanting to defend Mel Gibson, you know, literally 8 years ago when they were, and people have a tendency to want to come to the aid of the underdog.
Yes.
And, you know, now that they're attacking whites on TV, people have a tendency to be like, oh, wow, what are you doing, you know? And when I did that with Mel Gibson, I was CBS. I was on their website. They were trying to profile me. They deleted me from their website. I went on their YouTube board, and they were asking me, what race are you? What race are you? For defending Mel Gibson, I kept saying human race.
Yeah, that's my usual answer. That's my usual. Or rat. Sometimes if they say, what race are you? I'm rat. That's my race.
What's that?
Rat race.
What is that? What is...
A rat race.
Oh, I like it. I like it. I like that. Yeah, so, but what, you know what, this is disgusting. One of these, CNN, I think it was, or CBS, said, I can tell by your grammar you're white. What the hell does that mean? Excuse me for using the hell word.
Yes.
So who's the racist? Who's the racist? By your grammar? Because I believe I use proper grammar and punctuation. I'm a college graduate, so
yes.
Who's the racist? Number one, yeah, and then they told me I was a Nazi. So, so you know what? They put me on Team Nazi, and
yeah.
I'm a liberal from New York. So they're making enemies.
Well, it's a hard sell. I mean, this is a hard sell campaign to turn us against each other. Yeah, when you go to these rallies with these paid agent provocateurs, there's going to be a lot of violence. But I think by and large, out there in the general population, I don't think people are picking up on this all that much. Remember when that Zimmerman case, Trayvon Martin, case, and when they were going to read the verdict, and they said, oh, if it's not guilty, there are going to be race riots all across the country. The verdict was not guilty, and nothing happened because we all realized this is a government setup. They had one stage shot where they had a guy throwing a brand new from the hardware store, has never had garbage in it, garbage can, through the window of an out-of-business retail establishment, and he had to bring the garbage can with him because you could see behind him the garbage cans on the street are set into the cement. So basically it was a stage shot. They brought the garbage can, said throw it through the window, and the picture went all over the news.
They're lazy. They're propaganda, and they're lazy, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, again, propaganda is never designed to fool a critical, analytical thinker. Propaganda is aimed at people who don't want to think at all. They just want to sit there and be told that everything is hunky-dory and the government's got everything under control and the economy is great and humans are warming the earth. But more and more people are standing up and saying, you know, none of this is making any sense at all. Yvonne, got to let you go. Got to do a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a couple of quick stories. I got callers waiting on the line. I'll get to you in just a second here. Apparently, over in parts of Arizona, they are discovering fleas that are carrying the bubonic plague. Now, it had been eradicated from this country, and now all of a sudden with our open borders, we have these illnesses coming back in. Plague, scabies, H1N1, maybe Ebola eventually if we're not careful. I mean, it really is ridiculous. This idea of open borders and a one-world government and, you know, by golly, we're just... You know, no sacrifice is too great, including an epidemic. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Anthony in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. You said earlier that about Venezuela, that our government or the mega bankers are against them because of socialism.
Well, it's a little more complex than that. I mean, one of the issues is that socialist governments tend to spend the nation's wealth on the nation's people, and that makes it unavailable for harvesting by outside corporations. The other issue, of course, is control over Venezuela's oil and what currency it will be traded in.
Okay, that's understood earlier, but from my understanding isn't it that Soros and the Bilderberg Group want the rest of us serfs to be dependent on the nanny state?
Oh yeah.
That's why they support the Democrats, the socialist Democrats, especially here in California. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just wanted to ask you, isn't that the case though? I mean, Soros and his Bilderberg buddies and his New World establishment wanting to have a socialist state for the rest of us, the serfs?
Well, basically it depends on how the socialism is being managed. Now, in some countries, like you find in Europe, basically the government is returning to the people, pretty much all of the money it takes from them, and that's a socialism that does work. Then there are other countries that are called socialist where the government will take all the money and only give back to the population the bare minimum needed to keep them alive, and that, of course, frees up a lot of other wealth to go into things like wars and corporatism and so forth. So it's not like there's an absolute carved-in rock set of rules as to what constitutes socialism or fascism. They're constantly evolving with the ultimate goal, of course, of any government, which is to extract the maximum wealth and work product from the population for the minimum amount of upkeep.
Okay, well, our government is not working that way.
No, it is not.
It seems like they're taking money from us and trying to squeeze us to death. I mean, the middle class is no longer. There is no middle class in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yes.
People are running out of California, going to Texas, going to Arizona, Nevada, and I'm even thinking of doing the same thing.
Well, I mean, I mean, Claire and I, we're still trying to figure out a way where we can afford to get back to the mainland, but we're in no way would we go to California. They've gone nuts over there. And that's a shame because Claire's originally from San Francisco, and I personally have a lot of very good memories, both from San Francisco and the whole Hollywood film production community, as well as JPL and the rest of that. But looking at what's going on over there, they're luring these people on with promises of a workers' paradise, and they don't seem to realize it's going to be about as badly managed as the former Soviet Union. In fact, somebody actually just sent me one of the Antifa leaflets that apparently was being handed out in Charlottesville. And let me actually read this to you because you want racist hatred, this is it. And it starts up at the top. The evil white race must be destroyed. The white racist and their Hebe masters must be purged from the face of the earth. The children of the white racists are the future of the white race. This is where we must begin and end. With Trump in power, it is far too late, and they used the wrong spelling for two, for conversion of the racist children. Thus, we are left with only one option: to do what must be done. And then underneath it says... Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go on.
And then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then at the bottom it says, but take heart, after the purge, we will live in a workers' paradise free from racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and oppression. And it's got the signature at the bottom, National Antifa Front. Well, first of all, look back at the former Soviet Union and see what their attitude was about homosexuality, and you'll realize this is inflammatory rhetoric. But it doesn't really, it's certainly not a contract. They're just fanning these people up to violence.
Well, it's aimed at people of color and minorities to be against white people. It's a divide and conquer strategy. Isn't that what's happening?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's being done. Soros is funding, of what I understand, Black Lives Matter.
And Antifa.
This is... well, yeah. I mean, isn't there a way to get after this, to stop this? I mean, to stop this guy from funding? Isn't there a certain amount of money that you can fund an organization?
Well, forget about the amount of money. And as far as I know, there are no limits. Unless you're talking about a political campaign, and there are ways around that. But let's go back to basics here. George Soros is in violation of the USA Patriot Act in that he is using violence and the threat of violence to coerce a change in the political structure of society. And the only reason nobody's going after him is they know he's got enough money to keep the case tied up in court until after he's dead.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Mike, anyway, this is what I wanted to bring up is that what I'm trying to get at is that there is a socialist agenda for us serfs. And while the corporate elite, like in San Francisco, there is no middle class in San Francisco, Mike.
Yes.
You're either making $85,000 or more a year, or you're low income, making less than $35,000 a year. They have low income housing for people like that.
Yes.
So, and San Francisco is just a haven for homeless people, and they have done nothing. The streets are bad. They're dirty. In certain areas, and I'm from the Bay Area, and I live in Stockton now. And anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that there is a socialist agenda, what I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, that that's why they support the Democrats, because the Democrats here in California have a socialist agenda.
Well, I disagree with you to the following extent. The Democrats and Soros and the rest of them are offering socialism as a lure because there's a segment of the population that feels that if they protest enough and riot enough, that they will get a fair apportioned share of the nation's wealth. But what is in reality being implemented is fascism, which is where all the wealth is concentrated at the top, and everybody else is living on handouts or welfare or minimum wage jobs.
From what I understand, fascism is the government takeover. I mean, a government takeover of businesses, Isn't that fascism?
No, actually, fascism, and Benito Mussolini said it should be called corporatism. It is when government moves over and aligns with corporate interests against the general population. And that's exactly where we are right now. Now, in a proper functioning nation, a republic, the government is supposed to stay in the middle, balancing the desires and greeds of the corporations against what's best for the population. Things like, we're not going to let you sell a bad product. We're not going to let you endanger workers on the oil platforms. But we have seen over the last several years where all the instruments of government are acting like they're agents for the corporations. Minerals Management Service ignored the fact that the blowout preventer on the Deepwater Horizon was 4 years overdue for maintenance. Securities Exchange Commission ignored what Bernie Madoff was doing for 12 whole years. We have the FDA basically totally in bed with the vaccine, medical industry, and GMO. And there are no safeguards left protecting ordinary people. It's the government is now out there saying you will buy the vaccines. We don't care if they're dangerous. You will eat the GMO. We don't care if it's dangerous. That is the essence of a fascistic dictatorship.
Okay, Mike. One other thing. When will Donald, as he promised, to drain the establishment swamp in Washington? Because this is all part of the establishment there.
Well, right? I think Donald Trump is all of a sudden realizing that swamp was a lot bigger and deeper than he was expecting, and it doesn't help the fact that he keeps hiring the crocodiles from the swamp into the White House staff.
Oh, my God, Mike. Okay. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Nancy in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I listened to Dick Marr's reports. He was, very influential starting back in the Clinton government or whatever. And he's been putting out some really good reports on how government works. I don't agree with everything, but one of his recent videos, he talked about how one of Obama's objectives was to make the population where they don't want to work and just get government handouts. And he says that looking at the job numbers and how many people are applying for these jobs in the United States is frightening, because the people have elected what he wanted is to not work and to live off the government.
Well, it sounds really good, but the issue is, where does all that money come from? Because you can't just keep creating the money out of thin air to give to a population to buy their loyalty. Sooner or later, you're going to inflate the value of that currency to worthlessness, which is what happened in Zimbabwe. If you're going to run a country in a business-like manner, people have got to work producing goods, services, agricultural produce that other countries will want to buy. And that is really where our economy has broken down, is everybody's scrabbling over what wealth is still out there, and the machinery by which ordinary people can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries is all but gone. And part of it is the declining education, which justifies the H-1B visa problem. And the other part of it is because the financial sector got complacent on the Bretton Woods arrangement, they've allowed our manufacturing to decline or to be moved to other countries, along with all the jobs those create. And nobody wants our GMO agriculture. They're in a heck of a corner right now. And, I can almost smell the panic wafting over the Potomac.
Yeah, it was, I pay attention a lot for many years, and I was like, this is true, because I see a lot of the youth where they've just given up and decided, I don't have to work.
Well, that's the promise being made by the Democrats, and it's a very bad work ethic. I mean, I grew up in an age where everybody wanted to have a job they could be proud in. And yes, we all wanted to make some decent money along the way, but, we wanted to go on out. Claire wanted to be a composer and a choir conductor, and originally I wanted to work in the space program, and when that kind of fell apart, I said, I'll go and do in the movies, And you had those jobs not just because you were getting a paycheck, but because part of your self-esteem was there. Now, your self-esteem is all based on what fashion accessories you can buy at the mall and your participation trophies. And that's a dead end for any kind of an evolving society.
Yeah. No, I think we're in trouble.
Yeah, we are in trouble.
With with the youth. I mean, there's very few that I see from my kids' class. My kids are going to college and pursuing something. Their friends aren't even interested.
Yeah. Well, at this point, let's be very honest. For many people, going to college is actually a bad idea because you're going to wind up deeply in debt with a degree for a job that doesn't exist. So and this is for all the families out there, when your kid's talking about end of high school, going forward into college, you're going to have to really evaluate what's out there. Now, when I was wrapping up in high school and I'd won this science fair, so I'd come to the attention of people at JPL. Before I made that commitment, we actually did a job search. And yeah, at that time, aerospace was booming. When I come out of college with a degree, there will be jobs for me. And there were for a while. Then there was the post-Apollo crash. But again, these days a college degree has become more of a fashion accessory. And so we have all these people who've gone $30,000, $40,000, $60,000 in debt to be an art history major or a woman's study major or all this other stuff. And it's amazing to see all these women come on out there and say, well, men are making more money than I am. Oh, really? What was your major? Art history major. Well, maybe if you'd majored in electrical engineering, you'd be drawing down a decent paycheck.
Yeah, fortunately, my children were interested in things like one's going for nursing.
Good.
And one's going for engineering.
Good.
So they're doing something that is, there'll be a job, hopefully.
Yeah, there will be a job. There will be a job. There's always going to be a job for nursing out there. We have nurses and nurse practitioners in our family. And at some point, there's going to be a turnaround where they're going to start rebuilding the infrastructure of our country. And we're going to need some really good, skilled, trained engineers. Don't even get me started about all the goofs they've made with our light rail system at the bottom of the hill. I'll just be here ranting for the next 6 hours.
All right, thanks, bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Nancy. We're going to let you go. Okay, now, getting on back to the issue of computers and encryption, we're beginning to see a pushback now on this idea of absolutely open communications for the government, where Jonathan Evans, who's former head of MI5, is now saying that, yes, encrypted messaging for ordinary law-abiding people is not only permissible, it is essential. Because never mind the government stealing your business secrets, other people can hack in and steal your business secrets. So finally, a voice of sanity from this former head of MI5. All right, getting complaint about scratchy noises on the line here. Okay, all right, there we are. Now, let's see. We're going to start with Fred in Michigan, and we're going to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Michael.
Yes.
The space program.
Yes.
Okay, a couple years ago, it's probably still on YouTube. I haven't checked recently, but Project Orion.
Oh, yeah.
Was okay, and the purpose of which, this was a panel discussion, NASA folks and astronauts.
Okay, Fred, I'm going to put you on hold. Do not hang up. Do not hang up. We're going to come right back to this. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Fred in Michigan. We're talking about the space program, and apparently you saw this show on Project Orion. The Project Orion I'm familiar with involved an attempt to use nuclear fission as an energy source for rocket propulsion.
This presentation, Mike, didn't mention anything about that. What it was about is a new version of a space capsule that would be able to accommodate 2 or 3 astronauts.
Oh, the SpaceX, yes. They also have an Orion, yes.
Well, no, this was, okay, so it was all about having sophisticated monitoring systems built into this capsule, which would then monitor, document the effects of the radiation, the Van Allen radiation field, which I think is about 25,000 miles long, because they said if we're going to send people to the moon or anywhere else, we have to be sure that they are protected effectively. And, they made no bones about the fact that, not only were they concerned about the radiation effects on all their super advanced electronics on board, but also, of course, equally important is the safety, welfare of the human astronauts. So this is a Project Orion, and so it sort of begs the question, because on YouTube I saw 3 presentations, Mike. One is called Science Proves NASA Faked the Moon Landings. The other one
okay,
is...
let me cut in here again, because we're almost out of time here. The Van Allen radiation belts, they form a ring around the Earth, and you are right, they're about 25,000 miles out there. They are not a problem for satellites and spaceships in low Earth orbit. They are a problem for anything that is in the belts for a prolonged amount of time, which includes some of the geosync satellites. But in terms of going to the moon, your exposure to the Van Allen belts was very, very brief. It's like getting a chest X-ray at the doctor's. And again, we have to underscore the difference between brief exposure to radiation and permanent contamination. Permanent contamination being a lot worse. But in point of fact, we knew how strong the radiation belts were, first of all, from Van Allen himself, followed up by the other spaceships that we started sending out to the moon, carried radiation detectors like the Lunar Orbiter, Luna 3, the surveyors, all carried these instruments to get a good measure of how strong the radiation was. And they put as much shielding into the Apollo capsule as they could.
Yeah, but Professor Van Allen made this very vehement declaration that it wasn't possible with that era technology to put people safely through it's a 25,000 mile length of intense radiation.
Well, it's a ring. It doesn't have length. It's a ring. And by the way, obviously, if you look at how much time between Dr. Van Allen and the Apollo, you realize they did come up with a solution. All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We've got to let you go here. We're going to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadtmiller's program, and we will be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, share what you learn here with everybody that you know. We're still trying to push back against this war agenda. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.